Welcome to Sniper's Rest. Sniper's Rest is the last best rest stop in the here and there, the place between where you're coming from and where you're going. I am Sniper Shadow, and I reside here in Sniper's Rest as a guide and custodian to those who pass through here. I visit the worlds of the multiverse often, but I am always here to guide and care for the travelers such as yourself that pass through the here and there. Today, we continue reading The Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. Our protagonist had spent some time speaking with folks who worked in Innsmouth and went exploring through the different parts of the large town, finally stumbling upon a local man willing to tell all about the mysterious place. Let's see what Old Man Zadok has to say. It must have been some imp of the perverse or some sardonic pull from dark, hidden sources, which made me change my plans as I did. I had long before resolved to limit my observations to architecture alone, and I was even then hurrying towards the square in an effort to get quick transportation out of this festering city of death and decay. But at the sight of old Zadok Allen set up new currents in my mind and made me slacken my pace uncertainly. I had been assured that the old man could do nothing but hint at wild, disjointed, and incredible legends, as I had been warned that the natives made it unsafe to be seen talking to him. Yet the thought of this aged witness to the town's decay, with memories going back to the early days of ships and factories, was a lure that no amount of reason could make me resist. After all, the strangest and maddest of myths are often merely symbols or allegories based upon truth, and old Zadok must have seen everything which went on in Innsmouth for the last 90 years. Curiosity flared up beyond sense and caution, and in my youthful egotism I fancied I might be able to sift a nucleus of real history from the confused, extravagant outpouring I would probably extract with the aid of raw whiskey. I knew that I could not accost him then and there, for the firemen would surely notice and object. Instead, I reflected I would prepare by getting some bootleg liquor at a place where the grocery boy had told me it was plentiful. Then I would loaf near the fire station in apparent casualness, and fall in with old Zadok after he had started on one of his frequent rambles. The youth said that he was very restless, seldom sitting around the station for more than an hour or two at a time. A quart bottle of whiskey was easily, though not cheaply, obtained in the rear of the dingy variety store just off Square in Elliott Street. The dirty-looking fellow who waited on me had a touch of the staring Innsmouth look, but was quite civil in his way, being perhaps used to the custom of such convivial strangers, truckmen, gold buyers, and the like, that were occasionally in town. Re-entering the square, I saw that luck was with me, for shuffling out of Payne Street, around the corner of Gilman House, I glimpsed nothing less than the tall, lean, tattered form of Zadok Allen himself. In accordance with my plan, I attracted his attention by brandishing my newly purchased bottle, and soon realized that he had begun to shuffle wistfully after me as I turned into Waite Street, on my way to the most deserted region I could think of. I was steering my course by a map the grocery boy had prepared, and was aiming for the wholly abandoned stretch of southern waterfront, which I had previously visited. The only people in sight there had been the fishermen on the distant breakwater, and going by a few squares south I could get beyond the range of these, finding a pair of seats on some abandoned wharf, and being free to question old Zadok unobserved for an indefinite time. But before I reached Main Street I could hear a faint, wheezy, "Hey, mister!" behind me, and I presently allowed the old man to catch up and take copious pulls from the quart bottle. I began putting out feelers as we walked along the water street, and turned southward amidst the omnipresent desolation and crazily tilted ruins, but found that the aged tongue did not loosen as quickly as I had expected. At length I saw a grass-grown opening towards the sea, between crumbling brick walls and the weedy length of an earth and masonry wharf projecting beyond, Piles of moss-covered stones near the water promised tolerable seats, and the scene was sheltered from all possible view by a ruined warehouse on the north. Here, I thought, was the ideal place for a long, secret colloquy. So I guided my companion down the lane and picked out spots to sit in among the mossy stones. The air of death and desertion was ghoulish, and the smell of fish was almost insufferable, but I was resolved to let nothing deter me. About 4 hours remained for conversation if I were to catch the 8 o'clock coach from Arkham, and I began to dole out more liquor to the antique tippler, meanwhile eating my own frugal lunch. In my donations I was careful not to overshoot the mark, for I did not wish Zadok's vinous garrulousness to pass into a stupor. After an hour his furtive taciturnity shewed signs of disappearing, but much to my disappointment he still sidetracked my questions about Innsmouth and its shadow-haunted past. He would babble of current topics, revealing a wide acquaintance with newspapers and a great tendency to philosophize in sentience village fashion. Towards the end of the second hour I feared my quart of whisky would not be enough to produce results, and was wondering whether I had better leave old Zadok and go back for more. Just then, however, chance made the opening with which my questions had been unable to make, and the wheezing ancient's rambling took a turn that caused me to lean forward and listen alertly. My back was towards the fish-smelling sea, but he was facing it, and something or other had caused his wandering gaze to light on the low, distant line of Devil's Reef, then shewing plainly and almost fascinatingly above the waves. The sign seemed to displease him, for he began a series of weak curses, which ended in a confidential whisper and a knowing leer. He bent towards me, took hold of my coat lapel, and hissed out some hints that could not be mistaken. "That's where it all begun, that cursed place of all wickedness, where the deep water starts. Get to hell, sheer drop down to a bottom. No Sanderling Kintek. Old Captain Obed done it. Him that found out Morin was good for him in the South Island seas. Everybody was in a bad ways in them days. Trade falling off, mills losing business. Even the new ones, and the best out of our men's folk, Celt and Privateering in the War of 1812, or lost in the Issybriggan range at Snow. Both of them Gilman Ventures. Obed Marsh, he had 3 ships afloat, Brigantine Columby, Brig Hetty, and Barquois Sumatra Queen. He was the only one that kept him on with the East India and Pacific trade. And Esdras Martin's back in Milady Pride made a venture as late as 28. Never was nobody like Captain Obed, old Slim Satan. I can mind to tell about future parts and calling all folks stupid for going to Christian meeting and bearing their burdens meek and lowly. Says there are good places like gods in some. Old folks in the Indies gods, and bring 'em good old fishing in return for the sacrifices, and you'd really answer folks' prayers. Ma Elliot, his first mate, took a lot too. He was aging folks doing the heathen things. Told about an island in East Ottawa. There was a lot of stone ruins older than anybody knew anything about. Kinda like them Pomade in Carolines, but with caverns of faces and looked like big statues on that Easter island. There was a little volcanic island near there too, where there was other ruins with different caverns. Ruins all wore away like they'd been under sea, and with pictures of awful monsters
all over 'em. Well, Sir Matty says the natives around there had all the fish they could catch, and sported bracelets and armlets and head rigs made of a queer kind of gold and covered with pictures of monsters just like the ones carved in the ruins on the little island. Sort of fish like frogs or frog-like fish. It drawed all kinds of old possessions that they human beings. Nobody could get about them where they got all that stuff. And all the other natives wondered how they managed to find fish in plenty, even when the very next island was lean pickings. Matt, he got to wondering too. So did Captain Obed. Obed, he noticed, besides, that lots of handsome young folks would drop out of sight for a good year to year. And that they want many folks around. He thinks some of the folks looks darn queer, even for Katniss. It took Obed to get the truth out of them, the heathen. Don't know how he done it. But he begun by trading for gold and things that they were. Asked them where they came from, for they could get more. And finally learned a story about an old chief, Walakala, they called him. Nobody but Obed could ever believe in the Yellow Devil. But Captain could read folks like they was books. Nobody ever believes me now when I tell 'em, and I don't suppose you will, young fella. Though, come to look at ye, you have kind of gotten the sharp reading eyes that Obed had. The old man's whisper grew fainter, and I found myself shuddering at the terrible, sincere portentousness of his intonation, even though I knew his tale could be nothing more than a drunken fantasy. Well, Sir Obed, he learned in days things and half most folk never heard about, and wouldn't believe if they did hear. It seems the Katniss is sacrificing heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea and getting all kinds of favours in return. They met the things on the little islet in the queer ruins, and that it seemed awful pictures of frogfish monsters was supposed to be pictures of these things. Maybe kind of critters that got all mermaid stories and such started. And they had all kinds of cities on the sea bottom, and this island was heaved up from there. Seems there was some kind of things alive in the stone buildings when the island come up sudden to the surface. That's how the Katniss got wind they were down there. Made sign talk as soon as they got over being skirt and pierced up bargain for long. Them things like human sacrifices. Had 'em for ages afore, but lost track of the upper world after time. What they done to victims ain't for me to say, but I guess old Bud want none to do sharpen out Escan. But it was alright with the heathens, 'cause they have been having a hard time and was desperate about everything. They give a certain number of old young folks to the sea things twixt every year. Maeve and Halloween, regular as could be. Also give 'em carved knickknacks they made. What the things they agreed to give in return was plenty of fish. They dove 'em up for all under the sea and a few gold things now and then. While, as he says, the natives met the things on the little volcanic islet, going there in canoes with the sacrifices out of Citry, and bringing back the gold lights, jewels, and was coming to them. At first, they didn't ever go to the main island, but after time they come to want to. Sometimes seems they hanker and aren't mixing with folks and having ceremonies and big days, maybe even Halloween. You see, they was able to live both on and about water. They was called amphibians, I guess. The Kansies told them how the folks from other island might want to wipe them out if they knew got wind of their being there. But they didn't deter much, because they could wipe out the whole brood of humans if they was willing to bother. That is, Any as they didn't have sign sack, as was I. The old ones, whoever they was. But no one to bother now lay low. Anybody visit the island. When it came to mating with them toad fishes, the Kanzi kind of balked, but finally learnt something to put new face on matter. Seems the human folks have got kind of relation to the water beasties, and everything come alive about the water onct, and only need a little change to go back again. Them things told the Katniss if they mix bloods, they'd be children, and they'd look human at first, but later turn into more of the things. Till finally they'd take to the water and join the main lot down there. And that's the important part, young fella. Them as turned into fish and went into the water wouldn't never die. Them things did never accept they was kilt violent. Well, sir, seems that the time Obed knowed them islanders, there was a full fish blood in them deep water things. When they got and begun to shoot it, they was kept hid till they felt like taking to the water and quitting the place. Some more was teached than others, and some never did change quite enough to take to water. But they turned out about just the way them things said. Them was born more like the things changed early, but them was nearly human sometimes. Stayed on island till way past 70, though they'd usually go back down under for trips before that. Folks had took to water generally come back a good deal to visit, so a man's would often be talking to his 5 times great-grandfather who'd left dry land a couple of 100 years or so before. Everybody got about the idea of dying, except in the canoe wars with the other islanders, or a sacrifices to the sea gods down below, or from snakebite or plague, or sharp galloping ailments or something afore they could take to water. But simply looked forward to a kind of change what one bit horrible after a while. They thought what they'd got was well worth what they'd had to give up, and I guess Obed kind of come to think same himself when he chewed over Wakala's story a bit. Wakalaki, though, was one of the few who hadn't got none of this fish blood, being a royal line that intermarried with royal lines on other islands. Wakalaki shewed Obed a lot of rites and incantations, and had to do with these sea things, and let him see some of the folks in the village change from human shape, somehow or other, though he never would let see one of the regular things right out the water. In the end, he gave him a funny kind of thingamajig, made out of lead or something, and he said he'd bring it up to fish things from place in water where they might be a nest of 'em. Idea was to drop it down with the right kind of prayers and such. Wakalaki allowed these things was scattered all over the world, so anybody that looked about could find a nest and bring 'em up if they was wanted. Matt said he didn't like business at all and wanted Obed should keep away from island, but Captain was sharp for gain and favoured he could get 'em gold-like things so cheap he'd pay to make 'em specialty of 'em. Things went on that way for years, and Obed got enough gold-like stuff to start the refinery and all weights run down a full mill. He didn't sell the pieces for folks you'd be all time asking questions. All the same, his crew get pieces dispose it now and then, even though they swore to keep quiet. And he let his women folk wear some of the pieces, as was more human-like than most. Well, come about 38, when I was 7-year-old, Obed found the island people all wiped out between voyages. Seemed the other islands had got wind of what was going on, and had took matters into their own hands. Suppose they must ha' had after all them old magic signs, as the sea things says was only things we're afraid of. No tell what any of them cankies would chance give a bit halt when the bottom of the sea throws up some island with ruins of deluge. Pious cusses that was, they didn't leave nothing standing on either main island or little volcanic islets, except which parts of ruins were too big to knock down. In some places, there was little stones strewed about, like charms, with something on 'em, like what you'd call a swastika nowadays. Probably one of the old ones' signs. Folks wiped out no trace, no gold-like things, and none nearby Kanskis could breathe a word about matter. Wouldn't even admit there'd be any people on that island. That naturally hit Obed pretty hard, seeing as normal trade doing was very poor. It hit the whole of Innsmouth too, because in seafaring days a profiteer master of a ship generally profited crews proportionate. But most folks round town took hardship times sheep-like and kinda resigned. But they was in bad shape because the fishing was petering out and the mills weren't doing none too well. Then the time old Obed had begun a cursing the folks on island for being dull sheep and praying to Christian heaven. That didn't help him none. He told 'em he knowed the folk and prayed to gods that gave 'em some really need, and says a good bunch of men would stand by him, 'cause he'd maybe get a hold of certain powers, and you'd bring plenty of fish and quite a bit of gold. Of course, them sarved on the Samati queen, and seed the island and knowed what he meant. But it wouldn't be too anxious to get close to see things I'd heard tell on. But them as didn't know 'twas about got kind swayed by Obed had to say, and begun at scud. Do set them on their way. Faith, bring 'em results.
Here the old man faltered, mumbled, and lapsed into a moody, apprehensive silence, glancing nervously over his shoulder and then turning back to stare fascinatingly at the distant black reef. When I spoke to him, he did not answer, so I knew I would have to let him finish the bottle. The insane yarn I was hearing interested me profoundly, for I fancied there was contained within it a sort of crude elegy based upon the strangeness of Innsmouth, and elaborated by the imagination at the once creative and full of scrapes exotic legend. Not for one moment did I believe that the tale had any really substantial foundation, but nonetheless the account held a hint of genuine terror, if only because it brought in references to strange jewels clearly akin to the Milaglan tiara that I had seen at Newburyport. Perhaps the ornaments had, after all, come from some strange island, and possibly the wild stories were lies of a bygone Obed himself, rather than that of the antique topper. I handed Zadok the bottle, and he drained it to the last drop. I was curious how he could stand so much whiskey, for not even a trace of thickness had come into his high, wheezy voice. He licked the nose of the bottle and slipped it into his pocket, then beginning to nod and whisper softly to himself. I bent close to catch any articulate words he might utter, and thought I saw a sardonic smile behind strained, bushy whiskers. Yes, he was really forming words. I could grasp a fair proportion of them. Poor Matt, the saging it was, tried to line up folks on his side. Long talks with the preach, no use. They had run the congregational pass and about town. The Methodist fella quit. Never did see Rizal Babcock, Bass in person. And the Rath Jovie was a mighty little critter, but I heard and seen what I seen, Dagon and Azarath. Bethel and Beelzebub, golden calf, the idols of Khan and the Philistines, Babylonious abominations, men, tackle up Saran. He stopped again,
and from the look in his watery blue eyes, I feared he was close to a stupor after all. But when I gently shook his shoulder, he turned to me with astonishing alertness and snapped out some more obscure phrases. "Don't believe me, eh? Then just tell me, young fella, why Captain Obers and 20 other folks used to row about Devil's Reef in the dead of night and chant things so loud you could hear 'em all over town when wind was right. Tell me that, eh? And tell me why Obed was always strapping heavy things down in deep water on the other side of reef where bottom shoots down like Clef and Lower Kent Sound. Tell me what he done with funny shaped lead thingamajig that Wallachia gave him. Eh, boy? And what did they owl on May's Eve and again next Halloween? And why the new church passings fellas used to be sailors wear them queer robes, cover themselves in them gold-like things Obed brung, eh?" The watery blue eyes were almost savage and maniacal now, and the dirty white beard bristled electrically. Old Zadok probably saw me shrink back, for he had begun to cackle evilly. "Beginning to see, eh? Maybe ye'd like been me in them days when I seed things at night about sea from couple atop my house. Oh, I can tell ye, little patches of big ears, and want missing nothing about what I got gossiped about Captain Obed and the others out to the reef. How about the night I took my pals ship glass up to the cupola and see the reef bristling thick with shapes that dove off quick soon's moonrise? Obed and the folks was in the dory. I seed them shapes dove off far we deep water and never come up. How'd ye like to be a little shaver alone in that cupola watching shapes that weren't human shapes, eh?" The old man was getting hysterical, and I began to shiver with nameless alarm. He laid gnarled claws on my shoulder, and it seemed to me that its shaking was not altogether of mirth. "Suppose one night ye seed some heavy offering Obed's dory beyond the reef, and then learn next day young fellow was missing from home, eh? Did anybody ever see hide or hair of Haran Gilman again, did they? And Nick Pearce, and Lily Watte, and Adriana Southwick, and Henry Grayson, eh?" Shapes talking sign language with their hands. Them had real hands. Well, sir, that was the time we began to get his feet again. Folks see 3 daughters and gold-wearing things nobody'd ever seen afore on 'em, and smoke started coming out of that refinery chimbley. Other folks were prospering too. Fish began to swim in the harbour fit to kill. And heaven knows what size cargoes we began to ship about Newburyport, Arkham, Boston. 'Twas then Obed got Old Branch Railroad put through. Some Kingsport fishermen heard about the ketch and come up in sloops, but they was all lost. Nobody ever see 'em again. And just then our folks organised esoteric order of Dagon and brought Masonic Hall off in cavalry camaraderie for it. Matt Elliot was Mason and aging and selling, but he dropped out of sight just then. Remember, I ain't saying Obed was set on having things just like they was on Kanky Isle, but I don't think he was aiming first to no mixing, nor raise no young'uns to take to water and turn to fish at eternal life. He wanted them gold things, and was willing to pay heavy, and I guess the others was satisfied for a while. Come in 46 to downtown, some looking and thinking for self. Too many folks missing, too much wild preaching at meeting of Sunday, too much talk about reef. Now I guess I done bit by tells Slicht and Maury what I seed from the cupola. They was partying one night as full of robed crowd about the reef when I heard shots betwixt the dories. Next day, Obed and 32 others was in jail, with everybody a wondering just what was afoot, and just what charge and aging them could be got. God, if anybody looked ahead a couple of weeks later, when nothing had been throwed into sea for long. Zadok was showing signs of fright and exhaustion. I let him keep silence for a while, though glancing apprehensively at my watch. The tide had turned and was coming in now, and the sound of the waves seemed to arouse him. I was glad of that tide, for at high water the fish smell might not be so bad. Then again I strained to catch his whisperings. That awful night. I seed 'em. I was up in the cupola. Hordes of 'em. Swarms of 'em. All over reef swimming up harbour next to Monarchs. God, what happened in the streets of Innsmouth that night. They rattled their door, but Pa wouldn't open. Then he clumb out catching winder with his musket to find Slackman Maury and see what he could do. Mounds of dead in the day, and shots and screams, shouting in Old Square and Town Square and Newchurch Green, jail thrown open, proclamation, treason, called it the plague from when folk found out half people missing. Nobody left, but just them, with Obed and them things, or else keep quiet. Never heard my pa no more. The old man was panting and perspiring profusely. His grip on my shoulder tightened. Everything cleaned up morning, but there were traces. Obed, he kinda takes charge and says things is gonna be changed. Others'll worship with us at meeting time, and sat in houses, and got to entertain guests, and they wanted to mix like they'd been done with the crankies, and Ephra didn't feel bound to stop 'em. Far gone was Obed, just like crazy man on subject. He says they brung his fish treasure and should have had Hank's arter. Nothing was to be different on the outside. We only keep shy a stranger if we knowed what's good for us. We had take oath old Dagon, and later they were second and third oaths that some of us took. Them as you'd help special, you'd get special rewards, gold and such. No use balking, for there was millions of 'em down there. They'd rather not start raising and wiping about humankind. But if they gave way and forced to, they could do a lot just set. We didn't have them old shams cut 'em off like folks in South Sea did, and them Kranskis would never give away their secrets. Yield up enough sacrifices and savage knickknacks and harbourage in the towns when they wanted it, and when they'd let well enough alone, wouldn't bother no strangers as might bear tales outside, that is, without they go prying. All in the band of faithful order of Dagon, and the children should never die, but go back to the mother Hydra and the father Dagon when we all come. La Cthulhu Fazaka Filuguma Wakan La Cthulhu Raila Gewanaka Faka Dagon. Old Zadok was fast lapsing into stark raving, and I held my breath. Poor old soul. To what pitiful depths of hallucination had this liquor, plus his hatred of decay and alienage and disease around him, brought that fertile, imaginative brain? He began to moan now. Tears were coursing down his channeled cheeks and into the depths of his beard. God, what I had seen since I was 15 years old. Man, takala prazen. The folks as was missing, and them as killed theirselves. Them told things in Arkham or Ipswich or sick places was all called crazy, like you're calling me right now. But God, what I seen, what they killed me along for what I know. I'd only took fuss on second and oath so daggone often Obed, so that projected on lesson of jury proved I told him things known about deliberate. I wouldn't have taken third oath. I'd have died rather than take that. I got worse around Civil War time, when children born sick 46 begun to grow up. Some of them, that is. I was afraid, never did no praying after that awful night, and never did see one of them, closest to in all my life. That is, no, never no full-blooded one. I went to war, and I've guts or sense I'd never come back, but settled away from here. But folks wrote me things weren't so bad. That I suppose was begun government draftman in town after 63. After war, it was just bad again. People began to fall off, mills and shops shut down, shipping stopped and the harbour choked up. Railroad give up, but they never stopped swimming in and about a river from that cursed reef of Satan. And more attack. Wind had got boarded up, and more noises heard in houses weren't supposed to have nobody in them. Folks outside have story about us, I suppose you heard them plenty, and seeing what questions you asked. Stories about things they'd see now and then, about queer jewelry as comes in from somewhere as ain't quite been all melted up. Nothing never gets definite. Nobody believe nothing. They call them gold like things pirate loot, and allow Innsmouth folks he's in firm blood, distemper or something. Besides them that lives here, show off many strangers as they can and encourage the rest not to get very curious, especially around night time. Beast balk at critters, horses, wassing mules. But when they got autos, that was alright. In 46, Captain Obed took a second wife that nobody in the town never see. Some says he didn't want to, but maybe was made to by them, as he called in had 3 children by her. 2 has disappeared young, but one girl, as looked like anybody else, was an etiquette in Europe. Obed finally got her married off by a trick to an Arkham fella. He didn't spec nothing, but nobody outside nothing will ever have to do with Innsmouth folk now. Barbarous mass that runs the refinery now is Obed's grandson and his first wife, son of Onesphorus' eldest son, but his mother was another of them weren't ever seen outdoors. Right now, Barbarous is about to change. Can't shut his eyes no more, and is all about shape. He say he still wears clothes, but he'll take to water soon. Maybe he's already tried it. They do sometimes go down for little spells before they go for good. Ain't been seen about public for nigh on 10 year. Don't know how poor fellow kin wife feeling. She come from Ipswich, and they nigh lynched Barbarous when he got caught 50 odd year ago. Obed, he died in 78, and all the next generation is gone now. First wife, children dead, and the rest, God knows. The sound of the incoming tide was now very insistent, and little by little it seemed to change the old man's mood from maudlin tearfulness to fearful watch. He would pause now and then to renew those nervous glances over his shoulder or out towards the reef, and despite the wild absurdity of his tale, I could not help beginning to share his vague apprehensiveness. Zadok now grew shriller, and seemed to be trying to whip up his courage with a louder speech. "Hey, you! Why don't you say something? How'd ye like to be living in a town like this, with everything a rotten and a dying and a boarded up monsters crawling and beating and barking and hopping round black cellars and attic every way you turn, hey? How'd you like to hear howling at night after night from churches in order of Dagon Hall, and know what they're doing as part of the howling? How'd you like to hear what comes from that awful reef every May Eve and Hallow Mass, eh? Think old man's crazy, eh? Well, sir, let me tell ye, ain't the worst. Zadok was really screaming now, and the mad frenzy of his voice disturbed me more than I care to own. Curse ye! Don't you see they're staring at me with them eyes? I tell Obed Marsh he's in hell, and he's got to stay there. In hell, I says. Can't get me. I ain't done nothing to nobody. Ain't told nobody nothing. Oh, you young fella. Well, even if I ain't told nobody nothing yet, I'm gonna tell her now. You just sat and listened to me, boy. This is what I ain't never told nobody. Says I didn't know prying after night, but I found things 'bout just the same. You want to know what the real horror is, hey? Well, this is it. This ain't what them fish devils has done, but what they're gonna do. They're a bringing up things about the war, where they come up from into their town. They've been doing it years and slacking on up lately. Them houses north of the river betwixt Water and Main is full of 'em. Full of them devils and what they bring. And when they get ready, I say when they get ready, ever hear of Shaggoth? Hey, do you hear me? I tell you, I know what them things be. I seen 'em one night when... The hideous suddenness and inhuman frightfulness, the old man's shriek, almost made me faint. His eyes looked past me towards the malodorous sea, were positively staring from his head, while his face was a mask of fear worthy of a Greek tragedy. His bony claw dug monstrously into my shoulder. He made no motion as I turned my head to look at whatever he had glimpsed. There was nothing I could see, but only the incoming tide, with perhaps one set of ripples more local than the long-flung line of breakers. But now Zadok was shaking me, and I turned back to watch the melting of that fear-frozen face, turning into chaos of twitching eyelids and mumbling gums. Presently his voice came back, a bit as a trembling whisper. Get up out of here. Get up out of here. They seen us. Get out for your life. Don't wait for nothing. They know now. Run for it. Quick. Out this town. Another heavy wave dashed against the loosening masonry of a bygone wharf, and changed the mad ancient's whisper to another inhuman, blood-curdling scream. Before I could recover my scattered wits, he had relaxed his clutch on my shoulder and dashed wildly inwards towards the street, reeling northward around the ruined warehouse wall. I glanced back at the sea, but there was nothing there, and when I reached Water Street, I looked along it towards the north, and there was no remaining trace of Zadok Allen.
That concludes our tale for this week, my friend. Please return next week and we will continue The Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. If you wish to rest some more, please find a space that suits you, whether you cuddle by the fire, partake in some food and beverages in our kitchen, take a nap in one of our many rooms, or take a stroll around the garden. Please know you are always welcome at Sniper's Rest, my friend. If you are continuing your journey, the multiverse is an ever-changing set of portals to explore, so good luck, my friend, wherever you end up. Wherever you come from and wherever you're going, thank you for spending some time here with us at Sniper's Rest. Remember to take care of yourself, be kind to others, hydrate, take a moment to look out into the world and marvel at how incredible it all is. How incredible you are, friend. Until next time, please take care on your way.